And if you're out for 6 months, if there's, God forbid, an accident that you've had to, and you're not there, could somebody step into your shoes and do what you do? Or at least train them to be somewhat and keep things rolling so when you come back, everything's fine. So I think that conversation, I think, needs to happen a lot more. I figured we'd start off and just kind of talk about what our clients have been calling about, kind of the difficulties they've been facing, and the pressures and things like that have been going on, and what you've seen lately.
Well, number one has to be interest rates. Our clients are seeing the cost of the money they're borrowing go up, which is just cascades through the business in the ways that it limits the amount of free cash they have to make new investment, to keep and retain their employees, to offer higher wages, right, and get people excited. Everyone's suffering with inflation, from the consumer level to the business level, and not having the money to handle those pressures is right, a big concern.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of what I'm getting is, I get the calls that say, well, look, the market looks good and inflation numbers look good, but why am I not feeling that positivity? And I think a lot of it's because their, cash flow wise, their debt service has gone doubled almost. The cost of all their goods have gone doubled almost. So the bottom line is just not there like it used to be. So they have to make tough decisions on how they're going to cut costs to bring that bottom line number up so they can reinvest in the business. And I think people are really struggling. These small business owners are just really struggling with where the interest rates have gone, because it's really just shrunk their availability to just invest in growth and invest in their people and invest in their business. And it's just been a really tough environment.
It has been a tough environment. I don't recall having too many conversations with clients that are like, we're knocking it out of the ballpark this year. I mean, yeah, I have a one-off here and there, right, that are some niche business owners are like, hey, we're not seeing any of this, but we don't understand why exactly. Right. But most of the calls are, why is this happening? What's going right on? What are you seeing? And I think it's not that they like to know, but to know that they're not alone suffering with these issues, I think is a comfort to them.
Absolutely. I think that's true. And I think, the ones that call and say they're doing great are the ones that really don't have debt. And because I think the debt has become what's really a burden. It's because you skip one or two payments, they're going to call the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right? And now you're going to have to go deal with the bank and figure out how you don't have to pay this large line of credit off. So I think it puts them in a real tight spot. And I guess the hope is, with the numbers as good as they are, the Fed starts managing the interest rates a little better and bringing them down. That makes it more palpable for these business owners to be able to handle the debt service and still keep their people employed and kind of pursue growth rather than trying to figure out how they're going to make their next payroll.
I think that the other effect that it's had is that the M&A market's cooled somewhat.
It has.
Buyers have retreated. The seller, who our clients are typically sellers, they don't have these great numbers that would generate the sort of purchase price they're looking for, because it's pandemic year, and then right, inflation. Right. So they're not seeing what would have been top dollar for their businesses, and now they're thinking, okay, well, how much longer do I have to hold out? When is it going to turn? And I can see value come back to my business. Mm-hmm. And so I would say, from an M&A perspective, I'm seeing half as many deals as I did last year. That's
probably true. I mean, at the beginning of the year, it seemed to be flowing pretty well, and then it is really over the summer kind of slowed down. I think there's another misconception out there, because there's a lot of news articles and things that say that private equity is raising all this money and they have all this piles of cash to sit on. But I've done a bunch of private equity deals this year, and they use debt also in addition to the cash that they deploy. So they don't have to deploy all of the cash for specific investments. They take some debt. It's beneficial for them, but they're also not doing that. And so they also come in and say, you have this huge debt service that we have to take on or knock out, and that devalues your business, so we're not going to pay you as top dollar, just like you mentioned. So I think it really has cooled the market down. I think the selling prospects have gone down. It's not as I'm going to go take this big bite, because somebody's offering me a ton of money.
Right.
If people are selling, it's a little bit more of a distress sale. Is like I need somebody to kind of help me bail out, but we're not there yet, right? I feel like they're kind of just saying, am I putting a Band-Aid on this until we get to that point where we can push through this kind of tough time? They're seeing it as temporary, which it may be. I have no idea.
And then what I see too, is that once the business owner gets the idea of selling the business out of their mind, is then they start looking inward. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to run this business for 5 or 10 more years, what is my succession plan?
Right.
Where am I going to go with this? I may not be able to sell, so how am I going to transfer this business to a trusted employee or or my family members? Right. It gives, in a few cases I've seen where a family business, that gives them a little breathing room because their kids that are in college now have a few years to gain experience and they may now come in the business and take it over, or we can start identifying top talent who could be potential successor owners and start building them up. I've had a call recently where a client wanted to just talk about succession planning and they're like, well, who do you want to give it to? Or who do you want to sell it to?
Right.
And they're like, well, we have some good employees. I'm like, are any of them ready? And they're like, maybe not. So now we have a little bit of runway to start to build up a next owner class, if you will.
Right. And another challenge there, not to bring up debt again, is these have to end up almost being like the owner that's selling out has to finance it.
Yes.
Because they're going to be able to give much better terms than the bank, which is these employees or their next generation are going to be much easier to afford than having to go to the bank, get a loan to give him a full, him or her a full purchase price. So it's the conversation has definitely changed. It's not how can I position my business best to sell for top dollar. It's kind of what's next. I need to have an option on the table as if I won't be able to sell.
Yeah.
How am I going to get it to either the next generation or to those key employees? And the ones that have come through now that are just going that they're ready. They thought they could sell their business. Now it's coming, okay, now we're going to sell it, but I'm going to sell it to my employees, or I'm going to sell it to my son, or I'm going to sell it to my daughter. And the terms are, I'm going to get paid out over 10 years. And
yes.
I'll give them a favorable interest rate and just pray to God that they run the business appropriately to be able to cover the purchase price. And so it's just a different conversation than we've been having, but it's doable. And, everybody, you ultimately want the best possible deal for your client, and the best you can do and the best we could do is just say, look, these are your options. And this is what we can do for you. And this is how best we can do it. And, ultimately it's their decision, but we just present the options and see how it rolls. But the options have definitely changed.
Well, in some cases, top dollar isn't the client's goal anyway, necessarily. Right. I mean, in a lot of cases it is, but in some cases it's family legacy or some other legacy that's involved, so they're less concerned about that. But the biggest hurdle I see is talking that when they're doing something where they're financing it themselves, is that they're not able to take the business risk off the table.
Right.
Is that they're basically continuing to shoulder the burden that the business is, like you said, the business is going to be run properly in a way that pays off the note that they're owed, and that's hard. That's a hard thing for someone who's looking at retirement and wants to relax for the first time in 20 years.
Right.
It's like, well, whether I get paid or not depends on if the business succeeds, and I'm not there. I can't control it anymore.
Right.
And those control issues are such a big. The entrepreneurs and business owners are control freaks typically.
Oh, absolutely.
They had to be. But
I'm sure you see the same thing. 9 times out of 10, they'll keep a board seat or some sort of say in something just to make sure that now they have an investment in the business, that it's protected in a way.
Right. Well, just like a bank would.
Sure.
They're a lender to the business, and they can set up their own metrics and ratios and making sure things are continuing the way they want to. Well, when we're talking about succession planning, there's both the idea of the long-term plan for an owner to exit the business and make sure the business is in good hands, whether that's to a third-party buyer or to a family member or employees or whatever. But even in the interim, I feel that a lot of clients ignore what I would call contingency planning. What happens if God forbid, they die or become disabled in the next 5 or 10 years? And fortunately, one, there are a number of insurance products that exist to provide a funding source for this sort of buyout. And two, it ensures that the owner and their family get some sort of value for the business.
Right. Absolutely.
What have you seen lately in terms of owners addressing those sorts of things?
Well, I think a lot of times they come to us too late. I think there's no age limit or company age limit to which you should come and think about, especially the contingency type planning. Because even if it's a 10-year-old company and the CEO is 45 years old and has another 20 years, you still need that contingency planning. Because what happens if you do pass away early and it's not something that's immediate and you need to plan for it? What's going to happen to your business, especially if that's the sole provider of income to your family? How are you going to replace that, right? And so, like you said, there's various options to fund those type of things, but that's a sooner rather than later conversation. That's not something I'm in my 60s and thinking about retiring and my mortality is getting more in my head. That's more of I have a business, it's valuable. If something happens to me, how am I going to protect my family? And how am I going to protect my business too? You don't just want it to go away when you pass away. So I think a lot of it is what I see is, people are coming to us. Whenever they come is great, but I think more of the younger generation needs to start thinking about these type, especially the contingency type. Of course, they're not ready to give up ownership, but you do want to groom management too, right? You do want to groom somebody to come in, and if you're out for 6 months, if there's, God forbid, an accident that you've had to, and you're not there, could somebody step into your shoes and do what you do? Or at least train them to be somewhat and keep things rolling so when you come back, everything's fine. So I think that conversation, I think, needs to happen a lot more.
I agree. The earlier they start, the better it is because the insurance is cheap.
Sure.
Both the disability insurance and the life insurance.
Absolutely.
And you can get a 10 or 20-year policy at reasonable rate, a term policy at reasonable rates when you're 40 versus when you're 50 or 55 or 60 or whatever.
Right.
Even if regardless of what your long-term plans are. And there's we have a number of creative solutions for creating what we call either direct purchase, where the company owns the policy and can buy out the person if there's an event, or we do cross-purchase policies where we identify a select group of management or family members who own the policy on the business owner, and they're basically funding the insurance to buy somebody out if something were to happen. But that's a like you said, I think that's a always available now conversation. Why don't we have this in place? You've had to have seen this where there's two partners, they're 50-50 in a business. And one of them passes and there's no mechanism in place to buy out. And now you're in business with somebody's spouse or family, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not the deal we signed up for here. So we need to help our clients recognize where they're exposed, I think. So
absolutely. And that's usually that first conversation when they come to us is, do you have an agreement between you and your partner or partners? And a lot of times they do not. And it's always, to me, the pressure point is, how much is that going to cost me? But in the end, do you really want to be in business with your partner's spouse or children or whoever, right, at that point, right? It just becomes up in the air as who's running this business. To get it down on paper, especially when everything's harmonious and everybody likes each other and there's no animosity between each other, to get down and create that agreement between you and your partner of how things are going to work in all these different scenarios, it's really valuable for your business and it's really helpful. It should give you peace of mind. The other thing too is when you are able to come sooner in the business, there's time to perfect your succession plan, right? If you come later and you're thinking, I want out of here in 1 or 2 years, your options shrink tremendously, right? It's just, there's not that much you can do, and you don't have time to spend to perfect it. So even if you put something in, when the company's 10 years old and, maybe it's not worth what it's going to be worth, it's a constantly evolving thing. And you have plenty of time to perfect it and let it evolve with your business to the point where, when you get to that point where it's hugely successful, you're already got a plan in place. And it's not some shotgun or fire drill to get something in place because, some life event has happened or something like this has happened and things like that. So I think there's a lot of value to taking care of this early on for a lot of reasons. Like you said, it's more cost effective and it just gives you a long runway, a much longer runway to be able to evolve and plan and get kind of things in place for your business.
As an individual, you like to know that you have life insurance in place to take care of your family if you, as the breadwinner, aren't there anymore.
Right.
It's no different in the business context. It's just slightly modified in the way that it's basically insurance for the business and your family at the same time, and making sure that there's some money there. Maybe you need to be replaced. Maybe the business owner needs to be replaced, or there just needs to be a set of funds there to give the family liquidity, and you can wrap it into your business in a way that's kind of tax effective and other stuff. So, and the cost, while substantial, is way outweighed by the benefits. It's
Absolutely.
But so many of our clients, that's not item one on their list to do day one of forming their business. But after a couple of years, when this thing is running along, it's time to talk and start thinking about it.
Absolutely. And it's just, early on, it's just easier. Because you can also it's also a great way to get liquidity into the business if something were to happen. Because the business can be the beneficiary of these insurance policies. And if you're gone and not able to produce, there's a void that you've got to fill and fill pretty quickly. And to have some liquidity injected into the business, it's going to be helpful to keep it from just crashing.